Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the officially acknowledged but not endorsed Mission Impossible podcast. Once again, this is Drew Taylor, joined by Charles Hood.
Hello.
You just heard Kevin Blumenfeld's great and legally dissimilar Mission Impossible theme music. Thank you, Kevin. I really hope everything's going okay with the legal battle that is about to befall you.
Yes, and Paramount, in case you need it, his contact info, I'm sure, is on kevinblumenfeld.com. And all you listeners, too, you could check out some of his other music. He's scored all of my movies and shows and stuff. He's an amazing composer. And hopefully he has a great legal team as well.
Just before we get started on this amazing Christopher McQuarrie interview, we never thought we would ever get him. We got him very quickly.
Yeah, that happened so fast. It's awesome. Ran into him at an IMAX screening of Fallout. Told him we had Lauren and Eddie on the show, and we've had so many great episodes. We did interview 2 parts with Lauren Balfe, the composer of Fallout, and
Eddie.
Eddie Hamilton was the editor of Rogue Nation and Fallout. We've talked to the stunt team of Fallout.
We talked to fans like Patrick Willems, who has a great take on the material.
Yeah, he had multiple video essays about Mission Impossible, including Who is Ethan Hunt, which is great. And we also have other great episodes about all the movies and the old show, and we did a great episode about unmade missions.
Yep.
Movies that weren't made by David Fincher and Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
Joe Carnahan. So there's a lot of great episodes to dig into in the past, and we've got other great ones coming up in the future too. More interviews with more people who've worked on the movies.
Yep. We've got an interview with Mark Bristol, who did the storyboards. We've got interviews with the Filmograph guys. We're going to have interviews with a bunch of critics who you guys love. So be sure to keep tuning in. And
other people who worked on the show we haven't announced, on the movies that we haven't announced yet.
That's right.
We've got another great name I'm very excited about.
We need to make sure we have him before we talk about him. Yeah,
but we'll talk to him in January. It's going to happen, he said. He's responding to our emails.
Yes. So far. So just a reminder to please subscribe. We are now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and we're coming to more outlets soon. If you could subscribe, rate, and review, it would be hugely helpful to us. And we've already talked way too long because this interview is way too good. So without further ado, the first part of our Christopher McQuarrie interview starts now. And today we have the great fortune of the one and the only Christopher McQuarrie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I cannot believe you are sitting here.
Yeah, this is
Well,
surreal.
Eddie Hamilton told me I had to come and meet you guys.
I know, yeah. and Lauren got Eddie. So
and
it's
Lauren,
really,
yes.
It's a domino
That's
effect.
it.
So by the end of this recording, we're going to have Tom Cruise on the phone. He's going to come in next week.
Using me to get to Tom.
Yes,
I knew it.
All it is.
I knew there was an agenda.
Well, we
I
wanted
to...
to...
Brad Bird, actually.
We'll get him.
He was on the set of Top Gun the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was. I had not seen him since the premiere of Ghost Protocol. So
wow.
We love
really nice.
We love him.
He's
love
great.
Ghost Protocol.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, we wanted to start with Ghost Protocol, actually.
Okay,
because
great.
we are very interested in when you came in and what you were doing when you came in.
Yeah, we've sort of heard vague stories about you coming in, and Cruise says in the commentary for Fallout that you came in and saved his bacon. We'd just love to know
How does bacon get saved?
Yeah, and what was it mid-production? What was the exact scenario?
So I will tell you, because I usually don't talk about my rewrite work, but Tom has been so indiscreet about particularly Ghost Protocol and then Top Gun. He mentioned Top Gun in the Empire podcast. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not keeping that a secret. But my whole thing about the rewrite work that I do is so that the next movie I go to work on, they know I'm not really here to get credit or do anything. I'm just here to fix the movie. So I usually remain very discreet about it. In the case of now on to the indiscretion.
Well, but you actually had a credit on the first teaser
as
for
writer.
Ghost Protocol.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so shall we talk about that first?
Sure.
So how it works, the way credit arbitration works. In the case of something like a Mission Impossible, that's an adaptation, not an original, because it's based on pre-existing material. Even though it's an original screenplay, it's based on Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt, blah 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 blah.
Right.
And what happens is when you write an adaptation, you have to prove to the guild that you've written 1/3 of the screenplay. And there are elements that go into determining those factors. The elements are if I'm remembering the manual, it's new and original scenes, characters and characterization, and dialogue. That's part one. The other part of it is your statement. You write a statement that says, hey, here's everything I do. And I just wrote a one-page letter saying, hey, I agree with the proposed credits. What happens is the studio puts forth proposed credits, and one of two things can happen. All the writers can agree, or the writers can disagree, and then there's an arbitration.
Oh.
If an executive, meaning a director or one of the producers, writes on the movie, it's an automatic arbitration. So everything went automatically to arbitration. You guys are glazing over because this is like super.
No,
this is not about Mission Impossible. Everything went to arbitration. I just wrote a little statement, and the studio, until the credits are determined, can put whatever they want. Because the credits are still being determined. Right. So at the time, my name was proposed, but I did not actually have credit on the movie. Right. And other than writing a letter that said, yeah, great, I didn't do anything to pursue credit on the movie. And over the years, I've learned more about the arbitration process, et cetera, et cetera. So what I did on the movie, when I came on board, Josh and Andre, the original writers, as I understood it, everything I'm telling you about them could be erroneous. You'd need them to answer that. But I believe Josh and Andre had a TV pilot. Something happened. Something was going on, and they went off to do that. And the screenplay the action was mostly there. But it was there in ways that were part of a story that wasn't integrated into the action. When I read the script, the big things were you didn't know what was in the suitcase, you didn't know what was in the envelope, you didn't know what the villain was doing. This was all a mystery in the movie, and Michelle Monaghan was dead. Julia's character was really dead. And I came on board and I said, look, there are two things going on. One, emotionally, if Julie is dead, no matter how this story turns out, I'm sad. It's 100 means you're at 90. Because no matter how well Ethan wins, he's carrying this failure that they've alluded to throughout the movie. And you got to let the audience off the hook. Tonally, in Brad Bird's Mission Impossible, you got to let him off the hook. The other thing that was going on was Jeremy Renner had a different backstory. His character of Brandt, he was still the agent who was now an analyst, but the reason why he couldn't go back into the field is he had hesitated, and his hesitation had led to the death of two nameless agents, and in this event they referred to as I think they referred to it as White River. Ironically enough, he ended up in Wind River a couple of years later. And so White River kind of became the code for this scar, this unhealed scar in his past. So I said, first of all, let's try to integrate Tom's story with Jeremy's story so that Jeremy's story is actually relevant to the movie. Right now, it feels like there are two movies happening. Right. And again, no matter how you resolve Jeremy's story, even at 100, you were at 90, because he still hesitated and these two guys are still dead.
Right.
Whereas if we integrate the stories to say that Jeremy feels responsible for the death of Julia, and at the end of the story we find out Julia's not dead and Jeremy finds out Julia's not dead, you get to use that emotional engine, but then you get to let the audience off the hook at the end of it. And now you'll notice you don't really hear it discussed that Julie is dead until Jeremy Renner tells the story.
Yeah.
So you don't, the notion of death in the movie doesn't come up until you're 70 minutes in, as opposed to right up at the beginning of the story every time I look at Ethan, I'm thinking that poor guy, his wife died.
Right.
Yeah. They're sort of alluded to early on. They kind of just say something happened, something it didn't work out. They don't say exactly what happened.
That could have been
Correct.
divorce.
So you're kind of trying to figure it out as the movie. It's done very well, I think.
And then and we did a reshoot when Tom goes to the phone to get the first mission that takes him to the Kremlin. Paula Patton and Simon Pegg are by the car, and he's telling the story about something went wrong. There was something about an unsanctioned hit, like why was Ethan in jail?
Right.
That's a reshoot, which we added later to start to build. What we did is we took the Julia story and made it a mystery, and we took all the other mystery stuff and let you know what it was. And that was my note to the studio, was take everything that's known and hide it, and take everything that's hidden and reveal it. Because respectfully, I'm not a mystery box guy. I don't believe in that kind of storytelling. I feel that leads to, I understand that it makes for very compelling narrative drive, but it brings you to the end of the movie and it inspires the three great words of cinema, which are and, so, okay. And if you hear any one of those three things, it's time to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that a mystery is only as good as its reveal. The whole reason I didn't make a meal out of Henry Cavill being the bad guy is because by the time I went, voila, you were going to go, and? So I knew that.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw it coming. So I love when we were testing Fallout and they're going, well, it's so predictable. I knew Henry Cavill was the bad guy. Really? When did you know he was the bad guy? Well, when he showed the phone to...
When he revealed he was the bad
guy.
guy.
You mean when I told you he was the bad guy? Right. Yeah. And Eddie Hamilton is so funny because he goes, he's got a mustache. He's got a bad guy mustache. Like the minute he walks on screen, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Same in Jack Reacher. I didn't hide Jai Courtney was the shooter. In the book, his identity was hidden. Well, in a book, you can hide his identity without really telling the reader you're hiding it.
Right.
They're filling in blanks that a film can't. And I said, if we hide his identity at the beginning, they're always going to know it's not Joe Sikora. And so when you do voila, I'm going to go, I knew that. If not the other three. So I said, the audience just wants to know what's going on in the movie, and we're just being too clever by half by making a mystery out of this. So tell them what's in the suitcase and tell them what's in the envelope. Because in the original script, the whole scene with the suitcase that was a scanner.
Yeah.
They were just trying to find out what was in the suitcase.
Okay.
There was not an effort to intercept them. They just wanted to know what was in the suitcase. And so what happens to that is that as Ethan Hunt is running through the sandstorm, Jeremy Renner is figuring out in the hotel, he's figuring out what the mystery of the movie is. And on his earpiece is yelling to Ethan what's in the envelope. And Ethan better hurry when Ethan's already running.
Right.
And I am of the philosophy that an action sequence, you cannot have exposition in an action sequence. The stakes have to be established. And what happens in certain movies is you'll see they're throwing their exposition at you during the action. You can probably think of a big action movie that came out recently that did it. And what that is there's just no confidence in the writing or in the action sequence itself. And what they're doing is trying to dress up exposition.
Right. Trying to trick you.
They're basically baking broccoli into your brownies to try to get you to eat the broccoli. And I'm like, just get the vegetables out of the way so I can just have my goddamn brownie. I don't want to taste broccoli in my brownies.
Right.
And that was a lot of what I was doing, was taking the mystery elements of the movie and creating a narrative drive that was just that you just were doing a lot less work to watch the movie. The other big thing that I did on the movie was the upstairs downstairs sequence.
In Dubai?
The two rooms in Dubai.
Yeah, so
basically everything going on in the Burj, the outside had been done, but the inside hadn't been shot yet.
Yeah.
So when Jeremy Renner grabs that briefcase and he's going to throw it out the window, that scene was written that morning. They started shooting it that afternoon. While Jeremy Renner is going to throw the briefcase out the window, and in between takes is freaking out because we've totally thrown out his backstory, which he's already shot. And he's like, I've been acting for half a movie. I was this other character. And I was like, it's all going to be fine. I watched all your footage. It's all going to work. I'm in the bedroom, lying on the bed, and Tommy Gormley, the AD, and Tommy Harper, the line producer, are sitting at my feet, and I'm writing the upstairs, downstairs. Brad Bird's Video Village is right next to me. So I'm like sending them the pages that they're going to be shooting for the next 9 days.
So you're talking to Brad about it while you're doing it?
And
he's shooting a different scene at the same time?
So like it's like a movie factory. It's crazy. All the stuff's happening at the same time. And I said to Brad, what do you want out of this scene? And he said, I want a shot where the camera drops through the floor.
Yeah, that's so funny. He talked to me about that whenever 2012. He said, I wanted to do that because it's an animated moment in a live action movie.
Absolutely. And I said, okay, here's the only place it can happen. If you structure the scene by these rules. So for Brad, he didn't have to then shoot it 40 times to figure out editorially where it went.
Right.
I said there's only one place it can go because of all these other things that had not really been worked out, because no one had worked it out editorially as a real-time sequence. It's a very clever scene.
Yeah.
But you'd have somebody say, "How are you?" And before you say, "I'm fine," we cut to the other room for half a page and cut back to you saying, "I'm fine."
Right.
You say, well, you can't do that. These things have to be happening. So every pause and every breath in the scene had to be accounted for, or else you're going to be in an editorial nightmare. And so because I had directed and because I had edited, I had an understanding of how to structure that scene on the page before it was ever shot. Well, Brad was 2 days away from shooting that scene when I did that. They would have and I said to Tom, if you'd brought me up a day later, I couldn't have helped you. We would have been past the point where I could have shot the critical scene that fixed the plot in the Burj that led you to the upstairs, downstairs. I was right on the verge of being too late. And at that moment, the studio kicked me off the movie because the studio didn't want the movie being rewritten. They just wanted the movie shot.
Yeah, but didn't Lindelof come in at some point too?
Damon Lindelof came in because there was another ending to the screenplay that the studio wanted that no longer fit on the movie. It was more to their liking. But the script that I had written took the movie in a direction that didn't allow that. And it fixed all of those elements I was talking about. It fixed the fact that Julia was dead and that Renner had this whole other backstory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The studio wanted their ending, and they were doing everything they could to somehow make that work. But by the time they were there, they'd already shot all the things that were directing the movie where it went and not where they wanted it to go.
So when you say the ending, you're talking about just this last scene in San Francisco? Or, yes,
the very ending where Tom reveals to Renner, and we reveal to the audience that Julia is alive, and I had written a much more detailed explanation of what was going on in that scene. What happens is Ethan says to the team, none of them have taken a mission. And Ethan says to the team, maybe someday you'll find somebody that you can tell all your secrets to, and maybe you'll even settle down with that person. And essentially he tells what happened, but in an abstract way. And he's essentially, and if you're listening carefully, which audiences don't, you're telling the audience that what happened to Ethan and Julia was what you find out in Fallout. And Brad Bird quite adeptly cut it all out of the scene because it was too abstract. It was obtuse as opposed to direct, and Mission is just direct. And until Ethan Hunt says something is true, it's not. And so they were not picking up what we were throwing down, so to speak.
That last little reference to the Syndicate at the very, very end of Ghost Protocol. So
Yes.
was that you or was that Damon?
No, that was Brad.
That was Brad?
That was
Okay.
Brad. And
then you picked up that ball for Rogue Nation.
And I refused to pick it up for Rogue Nation. I was like, I'm not going there. I'm not going to do it. And as Tom and I were developing Rogue, I said, the movie needs something like this. It needs some kind of stakes, because we don't have a doomsday plot in this movie. We're not doing nuclear weapons. We're not doing the Rabbit's Foot. We're not doing Chimera. What's the threat of the movie? What's the big thing that you're up against? And I feel like Brad threw it in our lap. Why aren't we using it? But we had set out determined not to create a Spectre for Ethan Hunt. That wasn't our world. And now it's kind of unimaginable.
Yeah.
So, but poor Damon was brought in, much to his credit, to essentially take the square peg of Ghost Protocol and drive the entire thing through a round hole of what the studio wanted the ending of the movie to be versus what Mission wanted it to be.
Right.
And Mission has a mind of its own. When you start to align the pieces and obey the narrative, you discover it's like, it doesn't matter what you want Mission to be. This is where the movie's going.
Right.
Well, we had one more Ghost Protocol question before we move on, because I know we don't have a lot of time. But we've been obsessed about this idea. Why Hendrix wears a mask to duplicate his assistant, and where that he had access to mask technology.
Well, he pulls off the mask and he reveals that it's so is that just a remnant from a previous script? It always confuses us, that little story point.
You and me both.
We're asking the wrong person.
Okay.
Yeah,
we'll ask somebody else.
it's before my time, and it had already been shot.
Right.
But you know what? It just goes to show you, it didn't hurt the movie.
No.
And
I've asked Bert about it before, and he's just kind of shrugged it off. So I've never gotten a concrete.
It doesn't hurt the movie at all. It's just a question. We're just
right. It's the expression "a hat on a hat." Drew Pearce used to love to use the expression "hat on a hat." It's a villain on a villain.
Yeah.
I understand it to be that Hendrix, the guy that they're after, knows full well that he is the asset.
Right.
And he knows, as long as people, I think he's outthought Ethan. He knows that Ethan is looking for him and is not going to touch anybody around him, because he understands they're all assets to get to him.
Right.
And that would be my reverse engineering or retcon, I believe you call it.
That's a great explanation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're done. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Now that scene on the train where he explains all of that.
Yeah.
That was another big thing we rewrote, was setting up the Burj Khalifa and setting it up so that you understood, because again, they'd shot a lot of it or were about to. We were going, well, why is all this happening? Why are we jumping through all these hoops? And so we beat out the logic of everybody's an asset, everybody's important, which then led to the Burj Khalifa. The interior of the Burj Khalifa went, once you've established those stakes in the train, where he very deliberately says, we're going to follow Moreau, who's going to lead us to Wistrom, and Wistrom's going to lead us to Hendrix.
Right.
The Hendrix is the mission. And you remember Tom's in there going, it's not the codes, it's Wistrom. If you could tell me that he'll never find another way to do it, I'll walk away right now.
Yeah.
All of that is constantly stressing, we got to get the bad guy. The shit in the suitcase doesn't matter. It's like, it's all about the bad guy.
Yeah.
And everybody is someone. And then when she starts fighting with Moreau and Ethan is going, I need her alive. It's all just to build up how important every element is, and then watch as all the elements evaporate. Yeah. And Ethan makes a choice to give them the codes, and the codes get away. Well, when the scene was about Ethan just wants to know what's in the briefcase, it's not in his power to give the codes to the bad guys, so it's not in Ethan's power to screw up.
Right.
And so I said, well, they shouldn't be they should be the codes, and then the whole idea is, hey, we'll scramble them. And if everything in the Burj had worked out correctly, the movie everything would have been in the IMF's control midway through the movie.
Yeah, well, that seemed to go diametrically opposed to what Brad Bird wanted, because I was just up at Pixar a few weeks ago, and he said, and John Walker was there, and he said that Bird's pitch to him about his Mission Impossible was, I want to make a Mission Impossible movie where none of the shit works.
Everything goes wrong and everything breaks.
Yeah.
Yes. And what was interesting, where that rang true, is when we got to the server where Renner goes into the fan thing. I read it 10 times and didn't understand what it was. And then I got to the set and they showed me a model of it. Because I spent the first 6 days of my first week were just absorbing the movie. I was watching all the footage, looking at all the sets, what sets have been struck, what sets have not been built yet, what roles have not been cast yet, what can I cut, what can I change, what is in stone. And in 6 days, I had essentially consumed a movie that they'd been shooting for 10 weeks and prepping for months before that. And they showed me this model, and I went, finally, I understand it's a very hard concept to write on
the
paper.
Little robot and all. Yeah.
Yes, and it was the only one in which nothing went wrong. Renner went in, the thing started to get hot, and Renner got out. What I added to it was some of the stakes. I changed the satellite thing and whatever, but the thing I added to that in and of itself was, I was like, how does Renner get out? And in a way that's not. This was the only one in which things are happening exactly as they're supposed to, and that's not Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got to the actual sets, big, massive set that they built, and I realized, oh, wait, this is the mission where everything goes wrong. And nothing's gone wrong here. So I took Brad's overarching philosophy and realized the guy's a genius, and that's when the thing breaks and it gets sucked into the fan.
Yeah.
And all I added to it was, Renner, couldn't get up. And so he curls into a ball and then flings himself out. And then the joke about next time I get to sleep with I get to seduce the rich guy. Yeah. Which was a line I wrote in the script and thought, that'll never make it in the movie.
It's great.
And people quote that line all the time to me.
On Twitter, people are always
Well, to connect that to Fallout, we wanted to know, was there any concern that the philosophy of Lane in this movie was too similar to Hendrix's motivation?
Or did you write that line where he says, now there will be peace? Or is he like a precursor to the Syndicate?
I wrote Hendrix's, and that was again a thing of going, well, why is he doing this? So now I never would have written Hendrix as a character had Hendrix not already been written as a character and was already committed to doing the things he was doing. It was my job to come up with a reason that sort of made the movie align.
It seemed like it was a lot more cerebral to begin with. We've seen that footage of him doing the lecture. Scene. Yeah.
Oh, the lecture came later.
Oh, okay.
Because what the lecture was, that was all that scene in that train. Anytime you see a Mission Impossible and you see lots of exposition, it's always in a location where you could just park it and go back and reshoot it 40 times. Hendrix was originally, if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be wrong, you'd have to ask Josh and Andre. Hendrix was originally he was a guy who'd gone rogue. He'd just kind of gone off as rocker. I don't want to oversimplify it, but imagine a disgruntled employee. He was a guy who was angry at the and then I took that and went into this. To me, the notion was what happens after the end of the world. The speech he gives is, my whole life was about contemplating the end of the world until one day I asked myself, well, what happens after? And you look at Hiroshima and you look at Nagasaki, and also you look at Germany. The way cultures change, the way cultures really change, is through horrible, horrible destruction. And it's kind of a chilling thing to contemplate, as we're in a very politically weird time in which it feels as though we're so divided and so evenly divided down the middle, and one side is looking at the other side saying the world would be better if you would just go away. That does not improve with an election. That doesn't. That doesn't just get better 4 years from now.
Right.
It feels like we're at a place in history where everything is sort of percolating towards some kind of conflagration. The only way the world really changes is either we have an enemy from without that unites us, or we end up in some, history will show you, we end up in some kind of really terrible conflagration. And so here was a guy going, let me just short circuit right to the conflagration.
Right.
Let me just get to it, because we're just dragging this out. And the art of that scene was writing the dialogue so that you got just what you needed to get out of his speech, but didn't lose. Ethan's talking to somebody on the phone,
Right.
and they're all learning stuff on the train. A lot of stuff is being thrown at you, and you have to construct that stuff very specifically so that you get everything we want you to get and miss everything that you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you get to make your own Mission Impossible movie, Rogue Nation, and
Yes.
Have
you
you heard
carry
of this
over the
movie?
syndicate, and you have the black dossier folder in the title sequence, which we love so much.
Eddie said
Reference
was you.
to the old show.
Oh yes, yes.
So I just want to know how much, how much do you watch the old show? I mean, we're watching all the old episodes, and we're big fans of it. And
I tried. I started watching the show, and I was determined to consume every episode of the show.
it's a lot.
It's a lot, and the shows are. The Mission Impossible, the TV show, is a great lazy Sunday afternoon watch. It's not a bingeable show.
No.
It's a very different pace. The production values are extremely low budget. There's some laughable stuff. The one about the Muslims. Have you seen that one?
I don't know if I've seen that. I've seen the first season, and then
yeah,
we're slowly getting through all the.
You got to see. There's one involving. There's one where they have to disguise themselves as Muslims.
Oh, I've heard about this. Yeah.
Oh my God! If you put that up there now, it's really something. And it isn't denigrating in any way. It's not villainizing the Muslims.
Right, yeah.
It's just so absurd and so.
Well, it got
completely
the show got
culturally
more.
numbskulled.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's really something.
They got more into the magical as the later seasons came in. I've seen pieces of the later episodes, and but the early to me, I love. And the first season with Dan Briggs is awesome, and
yes,
it's just some really great
Dan
stuff.
Briggs was a big part. Here's a big reveal for you. Dan Briggs was a big part of Rogue Nation. That originally
Your draft or Drew's draft?
In Drew's draft, in our earliest incarnations, the notion of a day. I went back and watched the show and thought Jim Phelps is dead, but there's still Dan Briggs out there, and how fun would it be for real deep dive fans of the show that a Dan Briggs character came into the movie? There was just no bandwidth for it anywhere in the film, and the lesson I've learned, having gone full circle, which I've talked about before, is fan service. And pardon my language, fuck that. It's just, it's a lost cause. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You do what you can to you have to focus first and foremost on just making an enjoyable movie, because what fan service does is it asks a limited spectrum of the audience to actually, in the moment, think about something else outside of the movie, for the sake of going, ooh, that's cute. That's from the other thing. Now, I have like lots of fan service ideas. I have like a quiver full of fan service arrows.
That's awesome.
that we've talked about and that I've outlined for Tom, where in the future, if you like, here's a thing you could do if it fits somewhere in the movie. And Dan Briggs was one of those.
Right.
Couple more that I'll keep to myself because they may show up. Like very, very, very inside the beltway, but you've got to find ways to integrate them into the movie so that they work on their own.
Well, it's pretty seamless the way you've done it in your two movies that you've directed. I mean,
thank
Max's daughter and everything is amazing.
The tape
it
recorder
doesn't
is
slow
the one
down
that
anything.
that I love.
Inside
tape
the
recorder in
Homer's
Fallout.
Odyssey. Just like that.
Yeah.
Love that. Also, the record store in Rogue Nation, is that a reference to the pilot? Because in the pilot, it goes in a record store.
It was not. It was a suggestion of Tom's. Tom really loved. Tom and I are both obsessed with analog. So, and Tom had this amazing record setup when it was like he had a super vinyl phase, and I mean it was like if you designed a record player for an aircraft carrier, this would be it. It was like a whole room, and the sound of it was incredible. It's basically if you imagine what Tom Cruise's record player would look like, you're correct. And so in the midst of all that, we came up with that idea of the record store, and then somebody pointed out later that was the first episode. Yeah.
Well, then you have the mousetrap in Fallout. There's a whole, you trick. Is it Delbrook? I think is his name.
Yes.
And there's a reference. I wondered, is this a reference to Operation Rogosh, which is one of the famous old episodes?
Where he gets hit by a car.
He gets hit by a car.
That is absolutely correct. You're the first person to point
All
out.
right,
awesome.
mark it down.
You're missing but you are, however, missing the other Easter egg in that scene.
Well, there's a reference to the first movie.
Well, his name is Dr. Delbrook.
What's that from? Why is that self? Is that
his name is Niels Delbrook.
Young
His
Frankenstein
name was originally yes, correct. It was Dr. Delbrook. It was the brain he was supposed to steal for Frankenstein.
That's right.
It was Dr. Delbrook.
Wow.
His name in Young Frankenstein is Hans Delbrook, and I changed it to Niels at the last minute. One, because I thought Hans Delbrook's a little too on the nose. I thought somebody might pick. The last thing I wanted was to have one film nerd laugh out loud in the screening.
Right.
And my godson's name is Nils. So
okay. No, I was not laughing. I was cheering for joy when that scene happened.
Yeah,
Cruz
great.
says go, and then Benji
we-
with the mask, and I mean it was just absolute pure
we had
joy.
struggled mightily to have a mousetrap in Rogue Nation, and had all these ideas for how we were going to do it. And the hardest part of the mousetrap, especially in an opening of a movie, is you have to indicate when a guy wakes up in a room how he got there. And the minute he indicates how he got there, you're going to smell a rat.
Right.
And so we could never, and we had another higher concept idea for what the mousetrap would be. And we could never make it work. It was a case of just way overthinking what you needed to do in a scene like that. And I just knew more about Mission Impossible come Fallout.
And that was it. That was the first part of our Christopher McQuarrie interview.
Yes.
I hope you guys liked it. We had a great time with him.
He's very, very nice.
He's a nice guy.
And I'm so happy he talked about Ghost Protocol.
Yeah.
We finally got some clarity about Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, let us know what you guys thought about that. If we talked about it too much, we were just like soaking it up. So I hope you guys did too. But again, just a reminder to subscribe, rate, and review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Visit LightTheFusePodcast.com and visit us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at LightTheFusePod. And thank you so much for listening. And tune in next week for the second part of McQuarrie. It's just as good, we promise.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at LightTheFusePodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.